Luke 23. Then the whole assembly rose and led Jesus before Pilate. They began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man subverting our nation, forbidding us to pay taxes to Caesar, and claiming that he himself is Christ, a king." So Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "You have said so." Then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against this man." But they insisted, "He stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here." On hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. When he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased, because for a long time he had wanted to see him. From what he had heard, he hoped to see him perform a sign. He questioned Jesus at length, but Jesus gave him no answer. The chief priests and scribes stood there, vehemently accusing him. Then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him. Dressing him in an elegant robe, they sent him back to Pilate. That day Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they had been enemies. Pilate called together the chief priests, rulers, and the people, and said, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I have examined him in your presence, and found no basis for your charges. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. As you can see, he has done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and release him." Now it was Pilate's custom at the festival to release one prisoner to the crowd. But they all shouted together, "Away with this man! Release Barabbas to us!" Barabbas had been thrown into prison for insurrection in the city and for murder. Pilate wanted to release Jesus, so he appealed to them again. But they kept shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" For the third time he asked, "Why? What crime has this man committed? I have found no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I will punish him and release him." But they shouted all the louder, demanding that Jesus be crucified. Their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He released the man they asked for, the one imprisoned for insurrection and murder, and handed Jesus over to their will. As they led Jesus away, they seized Simon from Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, and laid the cross on him to carry behind Jesus. A large crowd followed, including women who mourned and wailed for him. Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and your children. For the days are coming when people will say, 'Blessed are the barren, the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if people do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" 2 other men, both criminals, were led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his garments. The people stood watching, and the rulers sneered, saying, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him. They offered him sour wine, and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." A sign was fastened above him that read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Don't you fear God? You are under the same sentence. We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. For the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And having said this, he breathed his last. When the centurion saw what had happened, he praised God and said, "Surely this was a righteous man." When all the people who had gathered to witness this saw what took place, they beat their breasts and went away. But all those who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance, watching these things. Now there was a man named Joseph, a member of the council, a good and righteous man, who had not consented to their decision and action. He was from Arimathea and was waiting for the kingdom of God. He went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Then he took it down, wrapped it in linen cloth, and placed it in a tomb cut in the rock, where no one had ever been laid. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was about to begin. The women who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph and saw the tomb and how his body was laid in it. Then they went home and prepared spices and perfumes. But they rested on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment.